when I became self-employed, which was kind of a choice and it was kind of something forced on me, the first project I did, which was when I had my desk was in my bedroom, and I literally had to clear up my wife's clothes before I could start work. And, it was kind of, it wasn't McKinsey, put it that way. It wasn't like, I'm from the Boston Consulting Group. Here's my bill. It was like, I'm from my bedroom, and, I put my files on the bed, and then I work at the desk. The first people who suggested I work with them were a group of people who came to me and said, we think we're social entrepreneurs, but we've got no idea what that means. But that we're really convinced we're social entrepreneurs, and so that was 1997, almost 30 years ago. And so I wrote something about social entrepreneurs, and then through the years, that sort of idea just sort of echoed. And as it echoed, I've met people who were social entrepreneurs. And I have really met some remarkable people who I've had such a sort of privilege of meeting these people who have brought about really important change that they really believe in and has benefited loads of people. And one of the people who I have been most moved, most inspired by is Al. We have the opportunity now, not for a conversation lasting 2 hours, but for a conversation lasting a bit of the next 2 hours, to delve into what Al and the people he worked with have achieved. And we're going to do it in 2 parts. We're going to do, if you like, the first 20 minutes of this conversation is going to be about the visible, the public, the known, the achievements, what Al calls the ascent to the top of the mountain. And that's incredible stuff, what Al has achieved with the people, the whole group of people he's worked with. And then after a little bit of discussion and some questions, we're going to do the second half, which roughly speaking is the descent. And it's a story of why the descent is as important as the ascent. Why going down into culture and into meaning is as important as going up into finance, resources, laws, change, so on and so forth. So that's the second, and that will be a much more personal kind of discussion about what it feels like to lead that kind of change and be involved in it, and the kind of dynamics that you have to deal with personally. So I'm actually going to start the conversation personally, in a way, not in a way, but I'm going to start it personally, because there are at least 3 dramatis personae in your story, Al, who are here and their presence will be felt, but they're not here in person. One is your daughter, Liz. One is your wife, Vicky, with whom this was a work of a lifetime of partnership. And one is the organization that you, in a sense, came together to create, called Plan. Could you just start by telling us about Liz, Vicky, and Plan?
Okay, first, my heart's beating here. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me and getting to experience this building, which hits you with a wave of feeling. I can't believe he's adjusting this. I thought my ears were big enough to hold anything. Anyway, it's just...
Yeah?
Are we all working?
Go ahead.
All right.
Yeah. We can sing now. We can do some sort of double act. Yeah.
We could.
Yeah.
Anyway, very, very nice to be here, and I'm under the assignment of bringing this building back to Vancouver, British Columbia, where I live. So I'll need a bit of help with that. And also thank you for inviting me back to this beautiful country and this very beautiful city. Okay, so it always starts with people. It's always about a relationship, always, obviously. And can't remember if you asked me who to start with first, but why don't I start with Liz? Liz would describe herself as a poet and an artist. And by the way, I have Down syndrome, which means that sometimes it takes me a little bit longer to do things. But most of the time, I'm with you. So for her, it's both the real deal, her disability, and no big deal at the same time. The collection of people associated with PLAN were actually, PLAN, the organization, stands for Planned Lifetime Advocacy Network. I don't know why we made that name up, and I certainly don't know why we stuck with the acronym PLAN, because we are the furthest thing that you could imagine from being planners. We were, however, they were, the families were, a group of parents who, at that time were my age, and who I thought were really, really old, and they were aware of something that I wasn't either aware of or paying much attention to, which was that they were going to die sooner rather than later. And they were worried about what would happen to their son or daughter with a disability after they died. And they were worried about that because they had come to realize that exclusive reliance on professional services and programs was not enough, not nearly enough. And in those days, they couldn't take cell phones to the grave, so they needed to give instructions from then on. So they needed some kind of replacement. They didn't know what. They honestly didn't know what. They asked for help. And the burning desire was, please help me answer the question, who's going to be there to do what I do every day? Who notices that they're not wearing the clothes that we bought for them if they live in a group living arrangement, or that there's rotten food in the fridge and whatever. And then the third person was my wife, Vicki, who, if this was 3 years ago or 4 years ago when I was first invited to Denmark, would be here with me. She died 26 months and 4 days ago. But she's here. I shouldn't say but. I've learned not to say but, and she's here. We had a daughter with a disability, so the question was present to us. Vicki had created Canada's first family support institute, supporting families who had sons and daughters with disabilities. And we were soulmates. So we got to create something beyond our family together.
So, Liz, Vicki, you are in PLAN, these other parents, starting with a problem, and the problem opens up into a set of solutions, but also possibilities, I would say, probably. So one bit of it is the kind of networks of family and other support that you realized very quickly that people needed around their children that wasn't available from formal services. So can you say a little bit about what that model of support was like and where that came from?
Yeah. I should say that we started with a question, and we went looking for service and program solutions. And the biggest shift was to ask a second question, which is, what's a good life? And when you ask what's a good life, it is so unique and particular to an individual, and usually does not involve a program or a service. If I was to ask any of you here today, what's a good life, you would not say, a good life is being able to see my optometrist whenever I need it, to visit with my tax accountant to consult with Boston Consulting or Charlie. That's not how you describe your life. So that was a key. And so a good life led us to the appreciation that one of the biggest handicaps faced by people with disabilities was their social isolation and loneliness. There are a variety of reasons for that. And I'm not sure what it's like here in Denmark, in your country, but for sure it still is a challenge in Canada, which is social isolation and loneliness. And this became the team, the force that could represent families when families were no longer there. In order to understand, however, how to create what we eventually described as a network, a personal network, instead of a circle of friends, that was a distinct difference for us. We had to learn a new technology. This was before Facebook, before networks entered the vernacular, were in the gestalt. And that was really Vicky's most significant contribution at the time.
So Vicky helped map out what a kind of network of different people, relationships could be orchestrated by young people and the people who were directly related to them, rather than receiving whatever the social department decided you needed and they would then provide. So you put relationships and the good life at the center of what you wanted to create, not disability and inability and need. So one of the things that then happens in your story, I think, is that to get legal recognition of relationships turns out to be quite difficult. And so you have to engage with the legal and other frameworks around what would make that care possible.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say one quick thing about the technology of social networking. A couple of things about it. One is to look at the gifts of the individual rather than to describe what they can't do, which is the disability world. And looking at that gifts wasn't always obvious because some of those desires were deep down in an individual and then never had a chance to be expressed. So there's a whole thing about that. And the second thing we learned was that it was really useful to have a mediator, a person that we called a facilitator, who would coordinate the network coming together based on shared interests with the individual who has the disability. And Vicky's motto was for that facilitator, so that it didn't breed dependence, was to do as much as possible, but as little as necessary. So again, another paradox in here. Now, I forgot. I took a step back. Sorry.
So you start by creating a kind of new model of and so then tell us about you're taking that out then into the world of services and laws and professional. What happens then?
Well, we were, and I had come out of the service and delivery world in my province, and we were laughed at. We were scorned by our colleagues in the disability world. In some situations, we were actually kicked out of that camaraderie that had built around that, because we were departing from the known and assumed best solutions that were out there. We encountered a legal challenge, which was that was the question of competency. And again, I don't know what it's like here in Denmark for people with an intellectual disability, or what we sometimes call the developmental disability. There is not the presumption of capacity, or there wasn't. And neither was there a recognition of the validity of the personal ties that were developing in the network. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Is that over time your friendships develop, and their potential role in assisting somebody to make a decision. So we, one of our first challenges was to reform adult guardianship legislation in British Columbia. And ours is based on a common law tradition, which means that assumption of capacity is based on assuming that you know the nature and the effect of your decision. We were able to add into statute the existence of a caring, trusting relationship. So
Right.
that's your point, yeah.
So you go into the land of law, sort of legal kind of prescriptions and so on and so forth, in order to enable this new hybrid, unusual thing, at the same time as you're facing kind of doubt, perplexity, scorn, like what on earth are you guys doing?
Yeah.
That's dangerous. They don't know what they're doing. Do you have any idea what risk you're taking? So on, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But coming back the whole time to the animating idea of the good life.
Yeah.
What is good in?
Yeah.
So then tell us a little bit.
And no money. We had no money because we had a belief that we should take no money from government. Not that we're anti-funding from government, but if we were to act as an advocate in the long term for the best interests, and the existence of a good life, then, as one dad said to me, Al, every penny from government comes with a string, and if you have many pennies from government, you have many strings, and those strings get woven into a rope, and that rope will drag you everywhere but where you want to go.
Right. So that's and in this society where government is everywhere, that's a very important point. So there was a disavowal of some things. That's a line we're not going to cross, because if we do, it will be death by 1,000 compromises.
And it wasn't an government funding. It was that we saw ourselves as a partner with government to ensure that the services that they funded were at their peak always.
Right.
That was the way we would describe our advocacy.
So so we will get on to the registered disability savings plan, but just tell us a bit then about your stance there then, because you're how are you positioning yourself in relation to this big system? You're critics of it, or are you, because some people there's this dilemma, are you going to challenge it, or are you going to cooperate with it? Are you working inside? Are you working outside? I have a feeling that there were times where you were and people in that movement were really angry with.
So I had come out of running the executive director of a major provincial. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, a major provincial organization, and we led the closure of all our big institutions in British Columbia, and we did that by blocking roads, by biting the ankle of government, by accusing them of, our righteousness was in full display. And so it was a very, very traditional adversarial stance with government. That softened in plan. That softened in our work with plan. If you begin to think of the values associated with us, and we had 4, we've talked about some of them. One was no money from government, but respect for the role that government plays in our sons and daughters' lives. The other is that friends and family are critical, to a good life. I think I would not have described it at the time, but we learned to love government and to approach them with an open heart.
Right.
So that version of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so we ended up taking on the law reform of adult guardianship from within a massive conglomeration of nonprofits and volunteer organizations. And anyway, so
yeah. So then tell us about what happens. So you're changing the way that support and networks of friends, families, others are orchestrated around young people and their lives. You've campaign to change the legal framework. Tell us then about the sort of financing side of it, which is a big part of what Plan has worked on.
Yeah, so a good life is not a life inside a welfare system. And in fact, it was a hard word to leap over to, which is a good life is a life where you have wealth. You know, not Bill Gates type of wealth or the guy who runs Tesla kind of wealth, but enough wealth to be surrounded. And that word actually propelled us out of a welfare framework as well. And so we were helping with all the legal things. I don't know if you have trusts here that you set up so that they're available when a person dies and whatever, but by itself, that was not sufficient to guarantee a good life. So we then took on the challenge of how to shift financial flows both at our provincial government level, but also at our national government level. And to collapse that story, but it took 10 years, we created the first registered savings plan for people with disabilities, and as far as we know in the world. Right now I think the collective assets of that plan is around $12 billion. And that's money that is freely available to disabled person, is not clawed back by welfare rules and regulation, and can be used for whatever they want. I don't know how far you want me to go with that. But,
well, go a little bit further, because it uses the model of a retirement plan, but adapts it. So it's not a complete innovation. It's saying there's a thing over here that seems to work. Why couldn't we just apply it over here? And it creates an alternative, additional source of financing for...
Yeah, no, it's not a complete innovation. Nothing we did was a complete innovation. All we did was beg, borrow, and steal from everywhere and put it together in a way that served our purposes.
Right.
That's all we did, all the way along. And it also makes it, in that sense, easy to sell. You have a much longer argument if you want to get into why it would be important for disabled people to have their own money. The assumption in the culture is, why would they need money? They've got programs and services. They have their rights. What else is necessary? And so I can show you some of our first attempts to secure this plan. You know, it was like 3 pages of explanation. If you then say, oh, it's like a retirement savings plan, everybody goes, okay, okay, right away. So there is value in borrowing or rafting up to
making familiar
concepts that are already... That's how a lot of musicians, I'm told, make music.
Yeah.
If they want to introduce something new, they always tag it to something that already is there, and then bounce. Some of you are nodding, so you're musicians. I hope I'm in the right ballpark there. No, so that, for sure.
Yeah. And so the Registered Disability Savings Plan now available for disabled people, which is individual plans within the whole framework.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of a collective thing and a very individualized thing.
Yeah. What it revealed was, first of all, not everybody has access to family who has access to wealth to support that. The arrangement was really pretty... we use this term in British Columbia. I can teach it to you if you want. It's called skookum. It wasn't too bad. It was a good plan. If you put, I'll just use this illustration. But if you put $1,500 a year into the plan, it would be matched with grants and bonds of another $4,500. And so it could build up very, very quickly. And with compound interest, it builds up even more. So that was great. Not everybody could avail themselves of that, number one. And so that was a challenge. And what it did do, though, is it placed the equation between disability and poverty on the agenda. That, I think, underlying it culturally was the big advance.
Right.
Because I would say right now, I'm not sure what the stats are, I don't keep up with them, but I would say maybe only 30% are taking advantage of that registered plan of people who have disabilities. And so that then led us into this campaign to, with that awareness and seeing it, it led us into the campaign to adapt the concept of basic income. To create essentially a basic income supplement for disabled people.
So let's just catch our breath. So you're developing this innovation. As you develop it, the support network around the good life, you're running into these system constraints. One is a legal constraint, one is a financial constraint. You develop an innovation to solve it. You find that actually it can't solve all of it. So then you kind of open up a new front with the system. So all the time what you're doing is a sort of an innovation which is both creating its own kind of relational system and highlighting what's deficient in the existing system. It's a kind of probe, a provocation, an opening up. And so then just quickly tell us about the basic income supplement, because this is about to come into law in Canada. So this is, how long has this taken you to get that?
It is the law, and it's the first checks will start, monthly checks will start rolling on July 1st of this year. It's not perfect, but it's the framework. That didn't take us as long. Actually, the registered savings plan for people with disabilities took 10 years, I think. I think the basic income supplement took, I've lost track of my time, between 5 and 7 years. And involved building and nurturing a coalition of comprised exclusively of disabled people who not only ran it but staffed it and whatever. So that's a big difference from when we, in a sense, were running the campaign for the registered disability savings plan. So it got spread, and we had more reinforcements, and it became much more grassroots in orientation across the disability world.
And what kind of resource is that basic income supplement going to mobilize, both at a collective level and for individuals?
Well, it's $200 a month on top of the welfare or assistance payment that a disabled person gets. This is the money in addition to whatever funding there might be for programs and services. The sense we have is that we have the guts that will ensure it ramps up in the way that income support for seniors in Canada ramped up very, very quickly. I mean, it's not perfect, but I would say that poverty in seniors isn't eliminated, but it's severely reduced in our country. And we expect this plan to follow the same pattern. Because the framework is there.
So there's 70%.
We'd like it to be more than 200 even now. For sure. But,
So, let's take stock then. You've had this innovation, changed laws, created the Registered Disability Savings Plan, lobbied for this unique basic income. All of this is both innovations which are combinations of existing things and in a way completely new and unique and huge achievements. You're having, at this stage, both a huge influence on Canada, but also, I think, internationally, because that's how I first came across. I first came across Al's work with a group of mothers in Wigan, Carolyn Tomlinson, who just an amazing afternoon with a group of mothers with children with disability. And they said, these really weird people in Canada who've kind of taken up, who've got these amazing...
We call them skookum people.
Yeah, amazing ideas and stuff like that. So, and you've become, through this, you become influential. You become an Ashoka Fellow. you know, you've achieved scale and impact that most social entrepreneurs would dream of, starting from a group of parents with a question and no money, right? So how do you feel at that point? Where are you at that point in Etmanski's journey? You've achieved all this stuff.
Yeah. You know, in the realm of challenges, and I want to say this in a way that doesn't, you know, make it seem weird. I'm not trying to be, but I think it's a good start.
It's a good start.
It's a good start. Yeah, I mean, because when you look back and you see, I mean, what some great milestones in there, but that's 35 years of work,
Right.
and a ton of mistakes. You know, we haven't talked about, you know, the paths we went down to that were unproductive. We hadn't talked about the compromises we had to make. We didn't talk about the lies I had to tell in order to encourage funders to keep giving us some money, because otherwise, you know, et cetera, or, you know, or I don't know, the people we hurt or betrayed. We didn't talk about that. I mean, it's just a lot of stuff in there. It just takes time, and it's not over, and it likely won't be. This is a generational. All of our challenges, I think, are multi-generational, and so, you know, I've developed that. I think it was Chou En-lai, I believe it's his quote, when he was asked what he thought about the French Revolution, one of the former deputy premier or leaders of China, he said it was a good start.
Too early to tell.
Yeah, too early to tell.
Too early to tell.
Yeah.
But just finally, before we go to questions, I just want to get a picture of where you sort of this ascent. You know, you're building, you're driving, you're raising money, you're trying to get your innovation scaled, influencing politicians, all the rest of it. What's your reflection on the kind of leadership and the kind of organizational capacity that requires, and where it left you, this ascent up the mountain, as it were?
I you know, you might have to prompt me a little bit more there. I would.
Well, you got to the top of. I mean, you got to the top of the mountain and you looked around.
Yeah.
What did you see?
Well, I think ultimately all you see are other possibilities, other relationships, other partnerships, other ways to strengthen, you know, what already exists. That was certainly my experience. Was that, I mean, if you take like all of Vicky's work, which was beyond social networking, but you know, we had to work really hard to try and create a model of sustainability for these networks. The literature is full of all kinds of ways you can do it, but they don't offer you any way of preserving it once a grant is over. So they last for 2 or 3 years, and then disabled people once more experience a whole other chain of new people. So learning about that, and then that began to be adopted by other groups. Indigenous people in Canada asked us to work with them. Families who had children who had, I don't know what the term is here, fetal alcohol syndrome. It just began to evolve, and then people in the seniors community. And then, you know, a foundation did a major study of the challenges faced by Vancouverites, and what emerged was this whole sense of loneliness, which inspired a whole initiative across our country around belonging. And so those are all evolutions, and Vicky was in the middle of all of that, and able to provide expertise, experience, awareness, mindset, heart set, you know, understanding across that.
Yeah.
So it just keeps, it's, in that sense,
Growing
it's like
outwards.
a wave, and it's growing
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the same is true around poverty. I mean, our partners in the poverty world for the registered disability savings plan were primarily people who saw their sons and daughters as dependent on them financially. The partners that emerged for the basic income push that became the Canada Disability Benefit was all across the disability, all across the poverty world.
Right.
In our country. So a completely different. So it's always that.
Right.
Does that make sense? There's always more
yeah.
relationships, more more
So-
coalitions, more.
And in a way, there's a sort of going deeper, going wider at the same time.
Yeah.
Because you're finding more connections
Yeah.
with more people
Yeah.
around care, relationships, the good life,
Yeah.
self-determination
Yeah.
through interdependence.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of sense of broadening connection
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
Let's leave it there, and then Esbon, I think you're going to
Yes, thank you
organize
so
some
much.
discussion.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Asbjørn. I'm with the change agency Operate and Forandringskraft, and thank you so much, Charlie and Al, for your conversation so far. This was the first part of the interview, and now we'll have the first part of our reflections, because, as you said, Charlie, this is a place of learning for all of us, and I actually know that you, Al, are also keen to hear how your work and story resonates in a Danish welfare state, as it were. So we are going to spend 10 minutes reflecting on what we learned about Al's work, and I'm going to ask you, as change agents in a Danish welfare state, what do you think we can learn from Al's work? So please spend 10 minutes discussing this question around the tables. And then after that, you can share reflections and ask questions for Al. All right, everybody. I'll ask for your attention again as we round up the first round of discussions around the tables and turn towards the plenary. Thank you so much. So what did you talk about? What resonated the most with you? What reflections, first of all, and then questions. But first reflections. What reflections would you like to share with Al and Charlie? I know you had them because I walked around. Yes.
Thank you. Very interesting conversation you had. My name is Camilla, and one of the things that we talked about over here was, in terms of the Danish welfare system, I'm kind of curious. This was from my perspective, was that we have a lot of opportunities to create something like what you said, but maybe there's sort of an inertia or a comfortableness that's crept into some of our mindsets, because we've had a welfare system for so many years, and maybe that's created this set of the conversation is, what are my rights and what are you obliged to do, more than what opportunities could I take as an individual. And so it's like this thinking that there's always a welfare state that will fix it. And so why should we as individuals do all the work of 30 years of hard work to create this? So I'm just wondering, I'd like to bring back to the room and maybe to you guys this thought: is there something in the safety of the welfare system that creates an inertia around actually creating something like this here?
Maybe I'm going to ask the room to answer that question first, rather than you, Al, or Charlie. Is there an inertia, do you think? Are we complacent? Yes?
Hi, my name is Louise. and I've got about like 10 years of experience in the welfare system as a manager at a home and as a social pedagogue, what do you call it, yeah. And I find that there's non-inertia from the parents and from the workers, the social workers in there. We are angry and we don't know what to do about it. And I look around here and I can't really see any, or is it just me who's got experience from the welfare system? I'm the only social worker. Hi. But yeah, that's my answer.
If I can just, point to your table, because you had an interesting discussion around the scaling of the care or the initiative, the frustration, the action that parents feel. So please share that reflection.
Okay, I will just talk I just want to say where my position is. My name is Heidi. I'm a mother of a kid with autism and ADHD, but I'm also a former social worker, and I'm also studying sociology by September, and then I'm also a journalist. And one thing we were thinking about here were a lot about we are angry both as a social worker and as a mother. I am angry because things are not working as it is now, and we do not. My experience is that we need to live together in a different way than we do now, and it's also as if there's a lot of knowledge out there from all of us frontline workers that is never being scaled, and our way of measuring effect is not really something that is accepted within the research work or within the research field. So we feel as if they need to be, the usual excuse would be, well, let's do some more research about this. But the thing is, like, we have so much knowledge already now. Let's go and find it and scale up, though, that whatever type of knowledge and experience works out there, let's scale it up. That's just what I wanted to say. Is that something that we're kind of like talking about a little bit like this? Something like this?
Thanks. I'm just going to collect a few more reflections, and then I'm going to ask you guys to respond to them, to the conversation you're listening to. Johannes.
This is not a long comment, but I think sometimes what we experience as inertia is also an incredibly refined welfare state, where we are all so schooled and aligned in the principles, in the roles, who's a receiver, who's a giver, and the language around it. So when we are all so aligned in that, there's a lot of gravity in that, and sometimes we have a sense of something new, and we sort of manage to get out of a bit, and then suddenly we find ourselves back into the same logics of service delivery and so on and so on. And so I think there's something about our language that, but it's also cracking now. It's not 5 years ago. It's breaking apart and things are happening. But there's definitely something about us. I think we experience it here as well. It's so hard to break out of our understanding of how things are.
Thank you. Anders, you have a comment.
Just related to Camilla's question, we had a discussion about what you mentioned about what is the good life. If you have to ask people about that, it's not about rights and services, it's about something different. So maybe that's also something that is lacking or missing in the discussions that we have. Usually when we talk about dignity, it's how many showers do you get a week? Or, we never talk about what is actually the good life and what should the frames for that good life be. So that's one discussion we need to take. And then I think, just listening to the two of you, also I've read a book some years back by Chris Zook from Bain called Founder's Mentality, about businesses, grand businesses that were established and then fell apart when the founder left the company because they lacked the frontline obsession. The obsession of what happens out there in the interaction between people in the communities. And maybe that's what's also needed in our welfare system.
Yeah, and our founders from the 50s and 60s are long gone, so maybe we need them. Charlie and Al, what do you think about what you're hearing?
Well, maybe, I mean, I suppose one way to respond to your question, Camilla, and some other commentary in the room is about reframing, I suppose, is that we end up stuck because we're kind of asking the wrong question, and then we end up like this, and then it's inertia. And I suppose one of the things that I have been guilty of in the past, and I still in a way don't quite know the right thing to do, is do you open up a system and make it available to change by smiling and being nice to it and offer it, or do you open it up because you challenge it and provoke it and you're unprepared to put up with what's going on? And I just wondered what your experience was then of this seeing the system and seeing it in a way that makes it available to change but doesn't let it just say, oh, well, we'll close in on ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, every system operates differently, doesn't it? I mean, it's so the Canadian experience is probably different, you know, than here. So as hard as it is to get an innovation going, and as long as that might take, once it gets adopted in some way by a system, my experience is that it, without care and caution and continuous external contact, let's say, I'm deliberately not using the word advocacy, the innovation becomes an orphan or an island very, very quickly, or it just simply stands out there so different than everything else. So the capacity of the status quo to claw back everything is very hard, which is why, I mean, this was, in retrospect, this was just pure wisdom coming out of the families at our beginning, which was stay independent so that you can always have that relationship with, you know, with the system that is not compromised by taking money from them.
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, partly, but I think I'm also interested in where did you find, systems aren't homogeneous, are they? And then they're made up of people who basically want to do a good job. I mean, they don't come to work wanting to do a bad job.
Yeah.
And often in these systems, I mean, I think as you said, you know, the stress and frustration is felt on all sides and shows up in all sorts of different ways. Yeah. So how did you go about finding allies within systems? How did you judge where to make connections as opposed to be independent?
Yeah. Okay, I mean, so finding allies is definitely a strategy, but it's also very time-consuming, and doesn't happen so it doesn't happen immediately, and you're bound to make mistakes. And the one thing I've found out about allies is that they don't hang out in cool places like this, and kind of dress with Blundstone boots or something like that and drink coffee along with the rest of you. They often are hidden, and they have to be hidden to survive. But they're burning with desire, and they're waiting for you. I'm sincere. The ones I've found, they are just waiting for you. They have been treading water for, in some cases, 10, 20 years, and they're tired, and they're just waiting. But they're cautious, because if they're exposed, if their cover is blown, all potential is lost. So that's, I don't know if that helps, but that's sort of, you know, that's one bit. I mean, on another practical level, and this was an accident on our part, one senior, I don't know how you organize here, but at the assistant deputy minister level, so second below the top civil servant in the department, ended up coming to a retreat that we did for families through a series of misunderstandings, and the families welcomed her in. And I can tell you, I had a call with her, she's retired now, I had a call with her 2 weeks ago, and she still remembers that welcome. and what she learned from those families in 3 days
Right.
of living with them as being the most seminal educational experience and a shift in her own personal mindset and commitment that
Right.
emerged. That's just on a practical level. But if you can find near occasions for that, like the
Right.
fact that there are public servants here, but that you can do that at all levels because people are not in charge of a system, you'd be surprised at the number of people who are in charge of these big systems who are also waiting for you. And they
Right.
actually have more potential to move than the senior middle management, who are the ones who get stuck with crisis management and control.
Right.
So I don't know if I can use these,
Yeah.
bottom and bottom. The ones at the bottom
Yeah.
are definitely your allies.
Yeah.
You might get lucky in that middle ground, and it's worth it, so you don't ignore
definitely
it.
need those people
And
because
you
they
need-
can stop.
Yeah, they can
Yeah.
stop it, absolutely. But there's
Yeah.
a lot of at the top who
Yeah.
can give
So-
a nod and say, work with this
Yeah.
person. And they're not, it's unbelievable what happens over time when I think you have to go in, I think you have to, they have to see you as a creator,
Yeah.
interested in the same challenges as they have, and trustworthy.
Right.
Not there,
To make
in
you feel
effect,
guilty.
or not there to pitch.
Right.
Not a creative way of pitching
Right.
to get money from them.
Right.
I don't know if that
Yeah, yeah.
helpful.
So I'm just thinking, that's very helpful. I don't know if it's helpful for people in the room, but I think it is helpful. And I'm just thinking about Forandringskraft. And I'm thinking about Forandringskraft, which is the initiative that Britt and Anna's and others in the room, and Anna's and others are involved in. And just thinking about these society labs that, in a way, a chance meeting at a 3-day retreat with a group of parents and a senior official is a society lab, because it creates a kind of equality.
Yeah.
Equality is a great Danish virtue. Use equality to say, okay, be in the same space as the people who are frustrated or the parents who, that's shifting power, creating new relationships in order to open up. I mean, the things that systems really don't like is opening up questions they don't have an answer to. I mean, they really, really don't like that. There's a brilliant guy who I would love to bring to you at some point called Olli-Pekka Heinonen, who was Director General of Education in Finland. And I had a long conversation, I've had several long conversations with him. He said a couple of really interesting things, because basically Finland, like Denmark, there is nothing outside the state. I mean, there is no alternative but to work with the system. He said 2 things. He said, change only starts when people in charge admit they don't know the answer. You know, until you get people in charge to admit they don't know the answer. Because normally, even if you ask them a question, they'll say, oh yeah, we have got an answer to that. It's over there. And the second thing he said, which was really telling, was that if you treat the system like an enemy, it will behave that way. So you have to find a way of getting it to want to change, which is time-consuming and difficult. And it's easier, kind of, to do creative destruction, disruption, you know, whatever, and pretend the system isn't there. But that can then lead to complete isolation.
Yeah, and to having on your tombstone, I was right, they were wrong, but nothing changed.
Yeah, and you talked about your righteousness at the beginning with plan.
Yeah.
I've got the solution.
Well, before plan, I think I was, I mean, we were in different territory at the beginning of plan, which I didn't understand at the time, but I now know now, in that and so for some unexplainable reason, we took time, like years, to develop what we ultimately created, you know, even the basic program. And I now think it was because we had all experienced, I think of Vicky and I and the other co-founder, Jack, we all experienced profound loss. And it just, for some reason, opened us up in a much different way to embrace uncertainty, to be curious, to explore.
Right.
This is pure happenstance.
Right.
But I now understand it, since Vicky has passed through, my wife, that I now understand that we were grieving, and that this is an unexpected bonus of grieving.
Right. That it opens you to significance, connection.
Yeah. Opens your heart.
Yeah.
Makes you a seeker. Gets rid of a shitload of stuff that you're holding on to.
Yeah.
And so you're much more, you're familiar with uncertainty, and you know what upheaval feels like. So, and how to get your balance back.
Yeah.
In that, so that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And it's a verb. It's not a noun in the sense of it's grieving, and it's ongoing, and it morphs and it shifts, and it changes. And when I look back on that, the first 3 years, I mean, we were very small. We had no money. I mean, that's what it was. That was what it was like there. And I had come out of a job where I made, 1,000 decisions a day. I'm not saying they were the right decisions, but I made them all the time. And all of a sudden I was making no decision at all. Unbelievable. I had so much trouble with that. It was unbelievable, the shift
so it was
in that
sort
regard.
of disavowal on your part of power, position, authority.
Oh, well, I had no choice. If you have no money and if you're running something that nobody wants and cares about, and your colleagues are starting to chastise you or wonder if you've lost it in some way, then yeah, you definitely do not have power or status.
So that's interesting, isn't it? Sort of start with being powerless. You're more likely to come up with radical innovation if you embrace powerlessness than you are to embrace your power, in some sense. Because power leads you to make decisions, be in charge.
And to think you can go it alone.
Right.
And so we were completely reliant on our relationships. I mean, I had people, at the time I had hair, and it was long, and I had an earring, and I had one suit that was 30 years old, and I was being introduced to the corporate world and going into, and having people call our receptionist to say, can you tell Al to shave his beard or to cut his hair, to be presentable when you were going into corporate. But I had a whole exposure to being in relationship with people who ran businesses and corporations as one example of that. But you were totally dependent on relationships at every single level.
Right. So, Esbjørn, I'm not sure, are we in the should we just carry on having this chat? I mean, there are a couple of things I really want to get you to talk about. And one is the picture you give of your work is both deeply relational and emotionally complex. It's not straightforward. It's not victory. It's not just the kind of founder's story, the hero creates the innovation, the accolades flow. It's a much more complex story than that, I think. So could you tell us a little bit about how you decided plan was your life's work and you had to leave it, and you had to, you had to take a different position because actually this thing you'd created was virtually killing you.
Yeah, killing us. And I mean, in addition to using your credit card, it was using our time, I remember Vicky would get calls on the weekend from families about an issue that was going on within the network that were established. And when we started, that was just in the Vancouver area. And then as we started to spread, we had at the time, we're exploring a franchise model. And so across our country is a city called Halifax. So they're about 6,000, 7,000 kilometers apart. And we'd get phone calls from them about the tension within the group about this, that, and the other thing. And so what we thought was, by expansion, was going to kind of relieve us of some tension and pressure, was just building more and more. Eventually, I mean, without getting into all the details, we collapsed. We literally were on the verge of just leaving. We just didn't think we could handle it anymore. And we knew that no matter how successful those so-called franchises were, even if we created another 1,000, they would never make a dent in the poverty and the social isolation of disabled people in our country. They weren't enough. So it just seemed like I would say we were in despair.
Right.
And some wonderful human being who I think you know, Francis Wesley, put us through, I don't know, some kind of process where you have to present your tension, and then you've got maybe 10 or 15, 20 minutes to talk about it, and then you have to turn your back, and the people around the room then give you advice. And I still remember us, it was in Montreal. I can describe the wallpaper in the room that we were looking at as people were advising us. It was unbelievable. And we were in complete tears. And what they told us was that we didn't have to leave, that we could remain but in different roles. And that led to our creation of an institute.
Right.
And for a whole other approach. So we created 3 more, in effect, balls that revolved, maybe in the Venn diagram sense, an institute to share what we were doing, a whole structural approach to structural shifts, this lobbying that I told you about with government. So that was our changing Venn. And then what I probably would now call an exploring cauldron, where we could just keep flushing up stuff or doing stuff with what we were encountering.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, but that emerged out of out of one of the
but
toughest
you needed
periods.
to kind of pass it on, to leave it.
We had to leave it
to
in
let
that
it
sense,
go and
let others run that.
Because so that's an important step. But then one of the other things is you realised that you couldn't go it alone. That's part of that realization. But also that you could change lots of things, really obvious, big things, money, laws, service provisions, so on and so forth, and yet not really change the underlying assumptions on which all these systems were built, which are culture.
Yeah.
And that all social change is, in effect, cultural change.
Yeah.
And the cultural change gets ignored, taken for granted, not really invested in properly. So you can end up completely successful and yet still not really change what you really want to change, which is the position of disabled people in society and the kind of life they're capable of living, enabled to live.
As opposed to their destiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so an example of this. So culture is habits, attitudes, beliefs, values, right? I mean, and an example of this that we ran in from the beginning at the beginning is the registered savings plan is a great example, and we thought our salespeople, in quotation marks, would be the people in the service delivery system who would let their clients know all about it, and they didn't. And we couldn't understand why. And when we asked them, it was like, well, why would they need money?
Right.
Why would they need their own money? And so that's culture.
Right.
That's culture. I mean, on one level, intellectually, they could agree, oh yeah, it's a great idea to have that, but bore no relationship to their ongoing work. So that was the first realization that I now look at it this way: is your first move is a bold move, if you can manage that, and then your second move 30 years later is the wild move. First move bold, second move wild, and the wild move is into the cultural waters, is to learn to be a swimmer in those cultural waters. Now, if I read the literature, there's some discussion anyway around shifting culture. But it strikes me that that's the wrong phrasing, because I think if you jump in the water of culture, you're going to be changed by it. So I prefer engage with culture to shifting culture, because again, it's that arrogant mindset that we're going to go in, we're going to bring everybody toward us. So how do you do that?
Right. Be part of culture.
Be part of culture, yeah.
Be in the bloodstream of society.
In the water supply, in the bloodstream. Yeah, so that's, well, I'll get back to you on that one in 30 years.
But,
That's my current learning.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if you everyone in this room is younger than us. I'm just wondering what your advice to a younger social entrepreneur would be. Is it be bold, go big, build your thing, drive, but realize that 10, 15 years in, you're going to have to go back and address culture? Or is it, no, from the beginning, you have to think of your innovation as a cultural innovation, and you have to engage with culture? Because the thing about culture is that it is everywhere.
Yeah.
But to achieve stuff, when you've got no resources, you need a bit of focus.
Yeah.
So, how do you manage that?
So I think we can borrow from, this is where I think we can really borrow from the private sector, from business, in terms of innovation. So the guy who invented the Polaroid, Edward Land, said, the job of the inventor is to prepare the culture so that when the invention arrives, the culture asks, what took you so long? So that's just a kind of it gives you a mission statement. So you can, but I was listening, well, here's another, this is a silly example, but I'm here and you'll forgive me, but do you know where the term Bluetooth came from? Who know, out of show of hands, out of curiosity? Okay, so it comes, and how old is that term? By me? Shout out? 1,000 years, exactly. So you had a warrior king who's had many nicknames, one of which was Bluetooth. Right? And that was used, that was snatched out of the air when they were beginning to develop this new technology. Anyway, I just think that's fascinating, because when they put the Bluetooth term as a placeholder term, but they couldn't get rid of it because it had landed in culture. And that's one of the few things about technology I know, is that, because it's more a cultural name. And so, but I also listened to the guy, was it you who was talking, or said you knew him, or somebody anyway recently, who designed the iMac. And he watched people's behavior when they went in to buy a computer, and they were almost afraid to touch them. And in addition to all the technology associated with the iMac, the packaging they spend as much time on. And the initial iMacs were all colorful, and they had a handle, because
invite you to pick it up,
inviting you to pick it up, and so you could touch. So you didn't go in and go, those are just some silly examples. But how do you get around what you were talking about as a mom? Is that people understanding what it's like to wake up in the middle of the night with this stab of fear when you wonder what might happen if something happened to you? How do you get that across? Do you get that across with statistics? Do you get that across, by being loving and kind, or whatever? That's an emotional, visceral heart challenge that companies learn, especially the really successful ones, how to raft up to when they're selling their product.
Right.
So how can we harness that? Anyway.
So let's just, because we should sort of start on the downward slope towards the end. But you have done more than just try. Well, I mean, I'd be interested in what your account now is of your really brilliant book, Power of Disability, which is a direct engagement with culture to say, look, we've got this thing we call disability. It comes with this whole set of connotations, and we've got it completely wrong. That disability is actually power. That disability brings a power of creativity, resilience, joy, unity, authenticity, vulnerability. It brings all sorts of other things, and by parceling it up as need, we make it kind of dealable with, but actually if we were just open to it, it's a different way of living well. And it's in our midst, it's here. And every time we turn it into another, we close a little bit of ourselves to it. So that was a direct kind of attempt by you, I read it as, to try and change the conversation in Canada about disability. How did that go?
Did COVID come to Denmark and England?
That's what happened.
It was brilliant timing.
Right.
I don't know. That one I genuinely, I'm not joking, I'll have to get back to you on, in the sense of, the phrase "a good life" now, I think has entered the water supply. But it's taken a long time, like that framing. Most people would think, so it's the beginning of it. So I think those kind of cultural things that you launch into the culture like that do take time. I don't know whether the book will have a second life or not. The basic premise of the book was that if you eliminated the gifts and contributions of people with disabilities from the world, you would not recognize the world. And so I used that as the basis of discussing the range of aptitudes and abilities that people with disabilities have had through time, none of which have ever been associated with their disability, and none of which recognize that the person might have had a disability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe 2-3 final questions. One is as you go through this journey of shifting things, changing things, you come to this realization that culture is underpinning it all, and unless you engage with culture, you won't really change anything. But one of the other things I think you realize is there are a lot of other people. And this sort of sense of a sort of driven entrepreneur is inimical to change, because actually change requires collaboration, generosity, humility, recognizing the contribution of others, not just building alliances for the sake of your work, but building relationships and the strengths of others. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you now think about leadership and what that requires in this setting?
Those are two questions, so I think, or at least two, but maybe I'll just stay with it. So I used to say that my trade was community organizing. Now I would say it's a movement. I'm a movement organizer for the reason that you described, that if one can devote some of their time to exploring the movements, plural, that they are part of, that's a valuable lesson. When I do workshops, I'll also often ask people to do that. And they are completely surprised that they are members of 30 or 40 different organizations.
Of one kind or another.
Yeah, one kind. And so the job is not to create another movement. The job is to be a more responsible member of the movements you're associated with, and then to discern or choose those movements that you have the time to align with, that bring that broader possibility of cultural change in there. I mean, we can talk more about that, but that would be one of the things I learned, and that I had the good fortune is to be completely unaligned when you do movement organizing. Because as soon as people smell that you're going back to a home base has a board of directors or a department or somebody that you report to, they think you have a vested interest in the process. So if you can at all possibly be unaligned, that helps. And I happen, for the last 5 years in which I had a formal working life, I was in that position. It makes you, you're seen much differently.
Right.
In that regard. If I could be queen of a country for a while, I think I would probably find people who've had experience as movement organizers and give them free rein to do that kind of cultural curation.
Right.
So it's really curating what already exists. In terms of what I think I knew intellectually, but what I wish I knew more profoundly, I would say is to recognize the fact that the majority of people you see as your allies or beneficiaries or constituency, however you want to describe it, are people with broken hearts. And that our job is to rally the brokenhearted and the lovesick. And so a broken heart, I don't think a broken heart needs to be mended. A broken heart is an opportunity to expand it. And I now know that from experiencing, for being in my own grieving, process. Oh, I can't believe I used the word process. Forgive me.
I can think of one person in your life would be shaking her head.
Yeah. So grieving is one of many upheavals that we all experience in our life, and there are many. I mean, you could argue that the shift, what's happening in climate, has created grievers out of all of us. So let me say this is not a unique experience at all. But what grieving does is it does give you an opportunity to look at the challenges and the people who are challenging you with softer eyes. I think it's certainly a way to remove any sense of your own power, because it pushes helplessness right to the fore, and vulnerability, and any sense of hubris.
Right.
That you're on a mission and you've been chosen. So that's what my experience of grieving. Now, you kind of know those things. I've heard you talk about a lot of those things. I think we all, and you know them intellectually, but when you know them, when you get to really know them, then you operate in the world as a movement organizer or as an agent of change inside a system in a much different way. And I hope it's going to bring some authenticity to my life that, a kind of more, anyway.
I think there's something that runs through your story, which is you realize you're actually at your most powerful when you disavow power, because that gives you the opportunity to work with other people in a way that draws out generosity and contribution.
Yeah.
And so that leads me just like two final questions. One is, so when you've got things, if you notice in yourself through this long period of work, when you got things wrong, what do you think that came from? How would you avoid it? And when you got things right, what combination of things was going on there? Because in everything you've talked about, mind and heart, and kind of past and future coming together, and grieving and joy, you know, there's some sort of combination going on when it seems to me, when you get things right, which is not simple, it's not reductive, it is dynamic and uncertain. And by and large, when you've got things wrong, I think you've chosen one side of that, probably. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think I would try to avoid the language of right or wrong.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I think anger governed my life for a long time, and you know, the chip on the shoulder, and so it set me up to defy authority constantly. It didn't matter. I would argue with a stop sign. So, I mean, I wince sometimes at the things that I did with that kind of righteousness, and I wish I could go back and ask forgiveness of those people. But I don't think I'd be here if I hadn't tried all that stuff.
Right.
So I don't want to, I don't know.
It was all part of the story.
It's all part of the story, and it's part of my trajectory. Some people are more mature than I. If we're talking about me personally, there's a whole lot of people who are more mature than me. I didn't get lucky to find my soulmate until I was in my early 40s. And that helped a ton. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just really struck by the kind of people we've been inspired by. When you think about Karen McCluskey, who's come, and their kind of ability to kind of move in an egalitarian way through hierarchical systems, and to connect the small and the big constantly, and to mobilize feelings and facts, arguments and emotions, and to inhabit both those worlds completely fluidly and with great self-confidence, which kind of both brings, I mean, someone like Karen brings enormous charisma and enormous humility at the same time. I mean, there's something in that combination, if we could just try and work out how to bring that out more. And that one of the great kind of disservices of the sort of social entrepreneur thing that I started the whole afternoon with was the creation of the kind of myth of the sort of solo kind of social entrepreneur, the heroic kind of solution provider, all the rest of it. And how you develop that, I think, is a really, really important question. And so could you just close, because now we're in this period, right, where there appears to be this powerful political playing on othering, on them and us. We must keep them out, repatriate them, send them home, don't trust them, so on. There's a sort of separation going on through political discourse, also through technology, a kind of polarization going on. I'm just wondering what your advice to us would be to what we need to really hold on to think about. I mean, is it an ideal like justice or democracy, or is it a sense of a relationship, a connection, a belonging?
I don't quite know how to answer that. Those impulses and those that you're describing, those movements that exist, I've been a part of. And I've experienced in my own tribe, in the disability community. There's nothing that I see out there in terms of that behavior that hasn't existed within. So this is not I don't see it as advice, it's just an observation. So I think the place to start, is at home. So that's number one. Number two, this whole question of capacity that you mentioned is that people have gifts, whether people with disabilities, but recognizing the gifts that already exist in our communities. There's a lot of people that they're wondering how to navigate we're part of a system and we're wondering how to navigate that. And I see that collective behavior has underneath it still that capacity
Right.
for solving its own
Right.
challenges.
Together.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I'm not fearful about that or
Right.
despairing about that upheaval.
But that's what we need to return to
Yeah.
time and again.
And if anything, and so this is again what grieving does, is it sends you down. You are
Right.
on the earth and it's cold. It sends you under the earth. And you're fallow. Fallow. You're and that incapacity to do anything is a gift. That's what I've learned. And that so as these things are assaulting us in a media environment where it's like you're in a rainstorm, it's incessant, going fallow,
Right.
doing nothing could be a blessing.
Connecting with others and what might fundamentally connect you. I'm reminded at the end of a quote from June Jordan, the black feminist poet, said, "Things can't fall apart if there are no parts."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can I leave you with a quote?
Please.
I think this is from the Danish poet-scientist Piet Hein. The noble art of losing face will one day save the human race and turn into eternal merit what other people call disgrace.
Great. Esbjørn.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the first part of the conversation was indeed the ascent and the first 30 years bold move of innovating and solving stuff, and then the second move, of course, is the engagement with culture and the building upon your powerlessness and grieving and the alliances of the broken hearts that you were just talking about. And I think we should skip the talk around the tables and then rather just actually close your eyes and reflect for 30 seconds upon what we just heard. And what this means to each of us. And how it makes us feel. And what it makes us want to do. Thank you. Who wants to share something, say something, reflect, or ask a question? How do you feel? Yes. I'll pass the mic to you. Okay, great.
Well, first of all, thank you to everybody in the room. Thank you to create that space. And I think the first reflection that came to mind for me is to be gentle with oneself, and you don't have to, or I don't have to create something that you did, but I can still contribute. And I think for me, what I would take out of the room, and hopefully everybody does, is, okay, how is my life structured? And are there little things that maybe I can give a little shift to open myself up about other people's needs or other people's lives? And I can still create a better community, or I can create a change which doesn't have to involve planning a plan, which is amazing that people do it, but I think can also, like for me, it felt a little bit overwhelming of like, wow, 30 years, blah, blah, blah. And just knowing that there are all different possibilities to connect with people who live a different life than you. I think that's just something I would take with me.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful. A gentle power in powerlessness, perhaps. Anybody else who wants to share something? Yes.
Hello. Thank you for a very interesting talk. My name is Lena, and I've been working within like the disability tech innovation space and social research, and I just wanted to share some of my knowledge that I have gathered from working there, and because I actually feel that I need to mention this in this conversation, is that so I worked with this, inclusive design, universal design, and the basic assumption there is that we as a society, we have a mismatch in the way that we perceive disability as having a disability or not, which in reality it's more fluid. You could say that everyone in this room who wear glasses have a disability. We're just lucky that someone invented glasses. And we're so I also feel that there's like a fundamental mismatch in our system's view of disability that is very much a systems view, like very rights-based, and you check a box and then you get compensation. And I'm just wondering, in a radical social innovation perspective, if you scaled this innovation that you have been behind to the whole society, could we create a much more flexible system of universal basic income, where you are at various periods of your life obliged to have compensation for either giving care to elderly or your child with disability, or that is, do you understand my question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Al, how do you feel? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is off, but I don't think you need a comment from me, but I think what you're saying is that potential design or innovation or solution in one world or the other, in this case the disability world, actually has the potential to benefit the broader society. Totally agree.
Yeah, good point. Good reflection, thank you. So, we're nearing the end. Coming out of the first part of your conversation, Elle and Charlie, I was pretty sure that that financial innovation of the wealth fund, that's got to be my biggest takeaway. That's got to work. But now, after the second part, I think maybe the alliances of the broken hearts or the powerlessness is what's going to stick the most with me. So I think I'm going to end our time together here. Thank you so much, and thank you, Charlie and Elle. And Elle, you've written a book. Charlie, you mentioned it. So if you want to read more, learn more, you can find that online. And Elle, you'll be here for a few more days, I know. So we're eager to learn even more from you. And if you want to follow Forandringskraft, there's a QR code with the link to the newsletter by the entrance. So thank you so much.
Thank you.